Back into it. We're now going to go to agenda item 11. I believe this is our final item of the day, and I think we should start off. Let me ask if there's a staff presentation or some staff comments on this. I know we have a number of public speakers we'll want to get into and then come back for board deliberations. So let me ask first on item 11 if there's any staff comments or presentation.
Before the staff begins their presentation, any members of the public that requested to speak on item 11, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. You will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Fletcher and Supervisors. I'm Rami Telly again with Planning and Development Services. This time I'm joined by Vince Nicoletti. Today we are presenting an update on the county's socially equitable cannabis program. On January 27th, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to develop a zoning ordinance amendment that allows for a variety of cannabis uses. The board also directed staff to develop a social equity program that will prioritize equity, access, and business opportunities to help rectify the injustices caused by the war on drugs. The board directed an initial report back in 90 days and a return with final ordinances and policies within 180 days. Based on preliminary stakeholder discussions, there is a strong desire for the county to extend the program timeline beyond 180 days, which would provide additional time for outreach and ordinance development. Stakeholders from a variety of groups have stressed the value of a longer and more comprehensive approach, particularly to develop a comprehensive social equity program, which stakeholders suggest requires more than the 180 days. We're going to present two options today. Either stay on our current path and have ordinances adopted by July 1st, or take a slower alternative path that would allow more time for stakeholder outreach and ordinance development. The California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is at the center of our discussion today because the necessary changes to the zoning ordinance must comply with its regulations. Staff determined the best way to comply with CEQA and meet the 180-day requirement is to use a statutory exemption. The state's commercial cannabis statutes offer an exemption from CEQA, but with conditions. The statute states that CEQA does not apply to the county's ordinance adoption as long as the county requires future applicants to undergo discretionary review and consider environmental impacts on an individual project basis. Effectively, the exemption shifts the burden of complying with CEQA entirely onto future applicants. To return with ordinances within 180 days, staff would need to use this exemption, which expires on July 1st, 2021. To meet that deadline, staff must have ordinances substantially completed by March 26th to begin routing them to fellow departments for review. This results in staff having 2 months to develop the ordinances, which has raised concerns with stakeholders who favor a longer process. State Bill 59, which is currently under consideration, would extend the statute's expiration to 2028. However, since there is no certainty on whether the bill will pass, staff is approaching this program as if our ability to opt the zoning ordinance amendment using the CEQA exemption ends on July 1st of this year. Though using the 26055 exemption may be faster and less expensive to the county, there are drawbacks. As noted, individual applicants must undergo a discretionary review process, which entails completing a CEQA review at the time of permitting. each application's discretionary review process would require them to complete a CEQA document that may include multiple environmental technical studies, such as aesthetics, traffic, and hydrology. We estimate the county's permitting fees alone would likely be between $70,000 to $90,000 per project, which includes county staff time to review the permit process. This cost is in addition to the applicant's cost to develop the CEQA document and technical studies necessary for CEQA compliance. Each application would also require a public review period and time to respond to those comments, leading to a total permitting time of approximately 18 months. Although relying on the CEQA exemption would reduce the county's upfront costs, it would lead to a more expensive application process with higher barriers to entry for applicants. An alternative to the 26055 exemption is for the county to prepare a Programmatic Environmental Impact Report, or a PEIR. This would cost the county an additional $675,000 and take approximately 2 years. Though this is a longer, more expensive process for the county to undertake, it has benefits. First, there would be an enhanced stakeholder engagement. Not only would there be more time to meet with stakeholders, but we would be scientifically analyzing their concerns as part of the discussions discussions progress. This relationship will reduce the likelihood of challenges and lawsuits for individual applications in the future. Second, permits would be less expensive and less time-consuming for applicants. Though applicants may still need to undertake a discretionary review process in the future, under a PEIR, they would have to do fewer or no independent technical studies. The PEIR would analyze impacts of typical operations and include standardized mitigation measures. Future applicants may then structure their operations to be consistent with the PEIR. By doing so, applicants would need fewer or no technical studies, which reduces their permitting costs and time. Though we believe many future applicants would benefit from the PEIR, there is no guarantee that all would. Large operations, regardless of the type of business or where they are located, would likely still have to obtain a major use permit and undertake independent environmental studies. However, small to moderately sized operations placed in compatible zoning districts may be eligible for a lower permitting threshold that has fewer or no technical studies. Relying on a PEIR would allow for enhanced stakeholder engagement and reduce
Gary.
many applicants' permitting
I'm good.
time. Though there is no guarantee, the closer an applicant aligns their operations to the PEIR's analysis of a typical operations, the more likely the applicant will be able to reduce their costs and barriers to entry. For all these reasons, staff recommends the PEIR approach. Over the past 35 days, staff has engaged with a wide variety of stakeholders. Though our conversations have covered a vast array of topics, in the interest of time, we will focus on sharing stakeholder feedback on the program's development schedule. This feedback is part of the reason we are recommending slowing the program development and conducting a PEIR.
Social equity groups, including San Diego Cannabis Social Equity Coalition and Community Advocates for Just and Moral Governments, commented that completing this program within 180 days would likely not result in a quality program. They stressed the value and the need to prioritize the development of social equity, beginning with a needs assessment prior to identifying who and what the focus of the program should be. This approach is not feasible if staff is to return with ordinances in 180 days. Additionally, requirements for discretionary approvals can also inhibit social equity as they require additional resources to obtain, are subject to a variety of appeals, and can take longer to process. A meeting with community planning and sponsor group chairs was held on February 11th. Several participants felt that the cannabis industry would increase the likelihood of crime. They also expressed the desire to slow the process down to allow community planning and sponsor groups sufficient time to consider the program's implications and to provide meaningful comments to the Planning Commission and Board. Staff is currently reviewing the concerns raised by planning and sponsor group chairs and will continue to work with them. Staff engaged the Farm Bureau as well as existing San Diego County dispensary operators. Farmers noted that they would like to include manufacturing in agricultural lands to avoid long transportation times moving crops from farm fields to manufacturing sites. The existing San Diego County dispensary operators expressed their desire to have the zoning ordinance ban, which is set for April 2022, extended. County staff is currently investigating the best approach for making this change and intends to return to the board with ordinance amendments prior to the ban becoming effective. These are only a few of the comments shared at recent stakeholder meetings. Staff will continue to work with all stakeholders to gain their valued feedback and input. Staff reached out to 6 California cities and 11 counties to gain insight into their experience developing commercial cannabis and social equity programs. Though our discussions covered a wide variety of topics, the information presented today will be focused on other jurisdictions' experience relying on the 26055 exemption. We will continue working with other jurisdictions in the development of our overall program. One jurisdiction we spoke with cautioned the use of the exemption, suggesting that applicants are more likely to be litigated and that the permit process would be expensive for them. Another county that used the exemption stated that most applicants do not make it to approval because the environmental review process and public opposition make permits too expensive and applicants withdraw. Several jurisdictions that relied on the exemption suggested that a PEIR approach would have been better, one emphasizing the importance of a deliberate and methodical process that involves robust stakeholder engagement. Staff spoke with representatives of one jurisdiction that noted the exemption was sufficient for their purposes. However, that city does not allow outdoor cultivation, and most of the applications received were for urban businesses and existing retail facilities. Based on the discussions and fellow jurisdictions, staff recommends preparing the PEIR. This approach will reduce permitting barriers inherent in the program developed in 180 days, namely requiring extensive environmental investigation and discretionary permits for all applicants. By conducting a PEIR, the county could cover much of the environmental and community impact analysis up front rather than requiring individual applicants to take this task on alone. Though a PIR would cost the county an additional $675,000 and take up to 2 years, it would result in a more accessible program. Staff recommends the following. Find that today's actions are exempt from CEQA. Direct the Office of Equity and Racial Justice to lead development of the framework and strategy, including grant funding options needed to launch a comprehensive social equity program, and coordinate the effort with the land use permitting system being developed by PDS. Direct staff to return to the board in 180 days with an update on stakeholder outreach and obtain the board's guidance on future program decisions. For example, the board directed staff to investigate increasing sensitive site buffers from 600 feet to 1,000 feet. At the 180-day mark, staff can update the board with our findings and seek further guidance on that buffer. 4, direct staff to prepare a programmatic impact report. 5, establish appropriations of $675,000 for preparation of the EIR. This concludes our presentation. Staff is available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to our public speakers. Let's get through those and then we'll come back. I know we have a lot of board member comments. I have a few questions and I know others will as well, but why don't we hear from our public speakers and we'll come back to the board.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. I will note for the record that we received 18 e-comments on this item. We have 24 individuals that have requested to speak on this item in one group presentation. We will be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You will hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. You will then need to press *6 to unmute your phone. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the audio record. For the group, you'll have 15 minutes to address the board. For the individuals, you'll have 2 minutes to address the board. You'll hear the sound when your time is up, so please conclude your comments at that time. I would remind the public speakers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. Aaron, looking at the panel, it looks like we have 3 of the 4 group members. If we want to begin with the group.
Yes, we'll unmute the first group member and ask 2710. The group members who are present currently are 2710, 8296, and 9754. Would you like to proceed with your group presentation at this time or wait for your 4th member?
We'll go ahead and proceed.
Okay, great. We'll unmute all 3 of you, and then you can self-regulate your time. You'll have a total of 15 minutes, and please make sure all 3 of you speak and introduce yourselves during that time.
Okay, thank you.
May
I start?
I just said thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lincoln Fish. I am the CEO of Outco, one of the 5 operating cannabis operations in the county, and we actually run 2 of the operations. Thank you for taking the time to hear us today. All of us are scheduled to close down right now as of 2022 due to actions of the previous board. We are here asking you to do the right thing. The simple reality is that the previous Board of Supervisors abused their power and allowed their personal biases to guide their decision making. The result was that they nearly drove several of us out of business with no real facts to support their position. Every one of us raised a lot of money from outside investors and made promises based on our business plan. Those were entirely founded on the ordinance that the county put in place. The previous board made the rules, let us create a business based on them, and then with no warning, pulled the rug out from underneath us. And frankly, to be perfectly honest, Supervisors Jacob and Gaspar took a certain glee in watching us squirm. It was personal and it was wrong. We are fully aware the group we are addressing today did not cause this problem, but you do have it in your power to right these wrongs and make amends. We applaud the steps you are taking toward a new ordinance and a comprehensive social equity program. We will support that fully. But we are all bleeding badly right now from the actions that have been taken previously. We can't wait a year or two for some real change. We raised money to build out facilities and then we're told, nope, we changed our mind. My company, for instance, pays a cannabis premium for a 15,000 square foot building, but can only use half of it to run our operations. And we actually had to sell another building that was purchased at a premium because of these changes. And instead of fixing these things, basically, we went far out of line with what's happening at the state level. To my knowledge, we're the last remaining jurisdiction with a collective not-for-profit model still in place. We just recently were denied a bank account because of that. None of the events that the naysayers that you'll hear from have said would happen have occurred. No increase in crime, no data showing any of our products made it in the hands of children, and no increase in marijuana-related driving incidents in the county. What has occurred is a huge explosion in the black market and a big increase in crime related to illegal sale and distribution in the county. The previous board turned a blind eye to that and instead focused their personal ire on the 5 legal operations in the county. None of the people, the staff, suggesting we do this PAIR and do it right and take a couple of years, that's great. But none of those people have businesses that are basically being destroyed because of the whims of the earlier Board of Supervisors. What we are asking for today, and there are only 5 of us, just remember that. There are only 5 of us that are in this awkward position. What we're asking for today is to restore what was already granted in the original ordinance and to add in what's already available in every other part of the state other than San Diego County. You have the power to fix this right now, and there are only 5 of us that are affected by this immediate move. Please do the right thing and correct the fact that your predecessors did the wrong thing for 4+ years. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Fletcher and Honorable Board. My name is Ren Bowden, and I'm one of the operators of one of the 5 legal locations in the county. We understand that you do need some time to determine how this well-thought-out California ordinance fits within the county's land plan. The California ordinance is very thorough, and it contains all of the controls needed to regulate a legal market. The county's ordinance was written years ago and is obsolete in most respects. You've determined that we've operated, that we opened our doors legally, and you've determined that we've operated within the guidelines. You've also determined the rules for the new applicant. While you determine these rules for the new applicants, we are asking you to put us in line with what is currently the California rules, which we will inevitably be operating under. We have 4 requests that will align us with California rules and align us with all other legal shops in San Diego and the entire region. First is the right to sell edibles and drinkable products. We are the only jurisdiction in the state that is not allowed, it is not aligned with the California ordinance on this issue. We are in a pandemic right now, and medical cannabis has been deemed essential. The coronavirus is a respiratory disease, which increases the needs for non-inhalation options for our patients. The state's ordinance has put in many safeguards restricting the milligrams of dosing of these edible products and assuring that these products and their packaging are not marketed to and do not appeal to minors. The second ask is that we align ourselves with the adult use rules. This is the best way for us to eliminate the current illicit black market that operates so robustly right now. This moves the age up to 21 and over, which benefits the county immensely. This does not need a CEQA review. the city of La Mesa, the city of San Diego, and the city of Santa Ana, which is local as well, were all able to adopt adult use without a CEQA review. I suggest that you definitely take a look at what they've done to make this happen. The last is the third is the elimination of the collective model that Lincoln talked about before. This is a collective not-for-profit. It does not operate under the California state rules. We are mandated to operate as a for-profit, so we have to run a couple set of books in order to be compliant. These three asks will allow us to properly serve our patients, and these three asks will allow us to start digging out of this massive hole that has been created by these last 4 years of this unnecessary and unjust moratorium. The fourth ask will be covered by Don Bowen. I thank you very much for your time.
Hi, good afternoon, Head Chair Nathan Fletcher and County Supervisors. I'm Don Bowen from Ramona Cannabis Company. I'm pleased to be here to discuss the zoning of our business, expansion, and employment opportunities for the people of San Diego. Before I jump into our discussion, I would like to thank you all for having the courage, time, and wisdom to assure that there's a legal and regulated marketplace for the cannabis industry in the county of San Diego. Based on previous cannabis ordinance, the current license holders were restricted to purchasing M54 zone properties, 1,000 feet from any sensitive use areas such as schools and parks, and 1,000 feet from other cannabis facilities. These locations are in a high impact industrial zones and far removed from any sensitive use areas. All of the current license holders purchased these properties to build out large cannabis cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and storefront facilities. The vertical integration platform allowed for a robust business opportunity, such as all current license holders invest millions in their respective properties. We all submitted building plans for expansion. Many of us were close to final approval, but because of the ban, we were all left with incomplete projects. This essentially left many of the business owners with small fragmented businesses. And in this highly taxed and competitive marketplace, many of the companies are barely surviving. The reason I bring this up is not to rehash the past. I bring it up to highlight how we can work together to make better opportunity for business owners and employees looking to work in a regulated cannabis industry. Our ask can be easily attained by a two-phase process. Step one, allow for current license holders to receive their building permits for expansion. Step two, conduct environmental studies and impact reports for future growth and potentially less restrictive zoning requirements for cannabis facilities. We understand the importance of conducting an environmental study for future growth if we are going to make the regulations less restrictive. As you are aware, M54 zoning is already highly restrictive. It is also my understanding your predecessors had conducted studies and reports necessary to provide proper zoning for our facilities. We know that we have a monumental task ahead of us in creating a new ordinance. The county has laid the groundwork for our facility to expand and operate under the previous ordinance and state law. Again, our ask is to receive our building permit to expand, to provide local employment, and to do away with the illicit marketplace. Together, we can act swiftly to provide opportunity for the people of San Diego. Again, I'm Don Bowen for Ramona Cannabis Company, and we're here to assist you in any capacity necessary. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. That concludes the group presentation. Now we'll be moving on to the individual speakers on this item. I'll be calling you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. Please press *6 to unmute yourself when you hear your phone number, and then please state your name for the audio record when you begin. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board. We'll begin with 1444. 1444.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Wade. I'm a father of young children and a mentor to young men. I know you're balancing, as the Board of Supervisors, different considerations, but I want you to consider the industry and the public health aspect. You're promoting an industry that's promoted by big tobacco that needs to addict its customers to increase its bottom line. Marijuana businesses are about big money, and young people are often the target. When marijuana is commercialized, young people start to think this drug is safe with no risks. A recent study in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs showed that marijuana use among California teens is up 23% since it was legalized in 2016. Marijuana is often the first drug youth try, but often not the last, which can lead to more addictive drugs. Vaping marijuana delivers a more potent form of marijuana through vaporized concentrates, which can contain as high as 99% THC. In San Diego, marijuana vaping cartridges are the most sold product at these businesses. It is your duty and responsibility as the Board of Supervisors to protect our community. Public safety and health need to be your priority, and not promoting the marijuana industry and its predatory practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 7612. 7612. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. And if we don't hear from you and your phone number is called, we'll come back to you. Here we go.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Damian Johnson. I'm a youth coach for basketball and football teams who unfortunately know firsthand how difficult it has become for teens to deal with the isolation that they've been dealing with, the anxieties when they don't have their regular experiences with school and sports. When basketball practice began again, I recently took my son to practice in Rainbow, and I was dismayed to hear that the county's considering permitting marijuana outlets out here in the unincorporated areas where we live. Especially right now, under our current situation, there's a fast-growing and glaring problem that parents and adults who work with teens are facing, which is the declining mental health of teens and suicidal ideation. And now a social media culture that suggests that marijuana is the solution for anxiety and depression. By permitting more of these pot shops and grows in our rural communities, it reinforces that idea and that normalcy of marijuana use to our youth. The idea of locating marijuana storefronts in communities near the sports fields and parks where teens congregate and play sports is ill-advised. According to the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics from Ohio State, it reports that youth with mood disorders who use and abuse marijuana have a higher risk for self-harm, death by all causes, and death by unintentional overdose and homicide. Marijuana use disorder was documented in more than 10% of youth with mood disorders. I highly encourage you to consider these findings and rethink your position on locating more of these marijuana businesses in our county. There are plenty, and okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 7613. 7613.
Good afternoon. From a busy mother and planning group attendee who recognizes how much this proposed ordinance takes away local control as you box in planning groups, making them feel this is a done deal. Planning groups need far more time than is being suggested, since each planning group's area is very different, and those differences warrant your honest consideration. For years, the county has upheld their position against locating marijuana businesses and grows in rural communities for multiple reasons, as you have already always understood and recognized the negative effects they will have. It's disheartening the board is drastically moving in the opposite direction in such an unexpected manner. Regarding unincorporated land in Districts 2 and 5, it seems unfair that Supervisor Fletcher and Vargas would make recommendations regarding land use outside their own districts without any interest coming from the supervisors who are responsible to the citizens there, or any recommendations coming from the very robust and committed and experienced planning groups that serve the unincorporated regions. As a parent, this proposal contradicts Supervisor Fletcher's vigorous campaign to prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products and to place far more restrictions on tobacco retailers. Youth admired and applauded your efforts in speaking around the county, especially when you shared your firsthand experience with tobacco. Smoked and vaped marijuana products are no different. Marijuana edibles, waxes, and juices are nothing but a fruity candy-like treat that entices young people. These products have THC, the psychoactive drug in marijuana, with levels upwards of 95%. Yes, kids are getting hooked. Several youth have spoken regarding the ease with obtaining marijuana. I highly encourage you to reconsider this ordinance, as San Diego County does not need more marijuana stores or grows. Thank you.
Could you state your name, please? We lost that caller, but as a reminder to all the callers, please state your name for the record when you begin your comments. Our next speaker is 5195. 5195.
Good afternoon. This is Jim Whalen from J. Whalen Associates. Thank you again. I'm pleased to be of assistance. As I said earlier when you brought this issue up, I have a lot of experience with what doesn't work, especially in San Diego and in Chula Vista. A lot of those problems arose in the two jurisdictions because of the background check issues, which were sometimes unfairly so. And I think what you're doing now will begin to address that. A lot does work, though, and I applaud staff reaching out to find out what valuable experience the county can use. Technical stuff really makes a big difference, like measured distances from doorways and such a thing. Also, taking the time to do a program EIR is a terrific idea, and it will save a lot of money as well as opening the door to more thinly capitalized ventures who I believe you're targeting for inclusion. Also, let's make sure that the planning and sponsor groups, as well as the Farm Bureau, have an adequate time for input. You just heard something to that effect. You won't be able to persuade everybody, but a lot of the questions can be addressed given enough time. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 0354. 0354.
Hi there. I live out in Poway, and I just wanted to say that I strongly oppose this item. I work with at-risk populations, especially impressionable young youth, and there are many red flags and concerns that I urge you to take into consideration. Increasing access to a drug known to cause psychosis and other mental health issues, especially during a worldwide pandemic, seems extremely negligent and detrimental to our county. Not to mention, the proposal to allow edible and drinkable cannabis products would seem directly targeted at preying on our younger populations. This industry is all a money grab, and I don't feel that it is at all concerned for public safety. Marijuana use is up since the COVID pandemic, and so is depression and suicide rates, which we know have been linked. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 0247. 0247.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Eberstein. I'm the program manager for the San Diego County Marijuana Prevention Initiative. We focus on youth use and access. One of the issues I keep having is the lack of concern over the impacts this decision has on our youth. This policy will dramatically increase access, not just for adults, but every San Diegan, including kids. One just needs to look at the county data to see that marijuana is already an issue among our youth. The primary drug of choice for youth ages 12 to 17 in county drug treatment is marijuana. So I ask the question, how is more marijuana going to help this? And speaking of youth, this afternoon I'll have the pleasure of presenting at Friday Night Live Spring Jam Youth Leadership event with hundreds of middle schoolers from around the county. It makes my job harder when I'm trying to steer these kids in the right direction away from drugs and alcohol, and then policymakers increase access to drugs and fail to consider the data and public health impact. If you're truly serious about prevention, you would consider the data and the facts that we make very public on our website, ccrconsulting.org/MPI, or Google San Diego County Marijuana Prevention Initiative. Please remember your decisions have an impact on our youth, and on the people that are working hard in the community to keep our kids alcohol and drug free. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 2153. 2153.
Good afternoon. This is Kelly McCormick. I'm a parent. I run a youth tutoring program, and I'm a public health educator. And there are many reasons that this proposal will bring greater problems than benefits to the unincorporated areas. Among them, marijuana cultivation and manufacturing often bring a terrible skunk-like odor that can make it impossible to enjoy the outdoors or open your windows, have a negative effect on tourism due to the smell, and cause headaches and other physical symptoms. Marijuana has profoundly harmful effects on teens and young adults. Frequent use is associated with learning impairment, poor academic performance, greater risk of depression and suicidal ideation. And why is flavored tobacco restricted when flavored marijuana is not? Both attract youth. Both should be restricted. In the 4 years since the state began permitting marijuana businesses, there has not been a single minor decoy operation to ensure that products are not being sold to underage buyers. There is no evidence that the black market is reduced or eliminated by the addition of regulated businesses. It just increases the supply, and storefronts bring aggressive advertising. And prioritizing applicants with criminal records for the transportation and sale of marijuana is misguided. It's a cash business, often accompanied by firearms. These are just a few of the many reasons that this is not good for San Diego County. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 8888. 8888.
Good afternoon, Chair Fletcher and Supervisors. This is Eileen Delaney, Vice Chair of the Fallbrook Planning Group. We support staff's recommendation for a programmatic EIR, but also recommend that individual applicants do a local site analysis that tiers off of the PEIR, as well as requiring a discretionary permit and local planning group recommendation, as is required with the county liquor licenses. Also, as Kelly previously mentioned, we ask you to please carefully consider, and I say this with great emphasis, the implications of growing and manufacturing of cannabis on ag zones that are adjacent to residential areas throughout Fallbrook. Unpleasant odors, which is really an understatement, from the plants can be overpowering at times, and cultivation, if allowed in all ag zones, could ruin the peaceful and quiet enjoyment of outdoors that these residents currently enjoy. We appreciate the opportunity to make recommendations. Our goal is to continue to work with staff throughout this process and continue to make recommendations so that we can ultimately have an ordinance, even if we're not really thrilled with it, that encompasses components in the initial board letter, but also, and just as importantly, takes into consideration the lifestyle and character of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 4592. 4592.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Kathleen Lippett. It's bad enough when we hear misinformation and assertions from about permitted versus unpermitted marijuana businesses. But before making those same assertions, as some of your county personnel are doing at county planning groups, they should find out what actually is going on. The BCC is not regulating these businesses. They are a permitting agency, just like ABC. Their focus is not enforcement. The last check, they only had 29 sworn law enforcement officers for the entire state. How much regulation and oversight do you think that will accomplish? The promises that were in Prop 64, that it would reduce marijuana use. It's now at a 20-year high, so that didn't work out very well. Social justice, nearly all the marijuana permittees are wealthy whites, including Lincoln Fish and Bo Brannon. No increase in marijuana-related driving under the influence. They don't even have a test yet. They were simply promised in Prop 64 it wouldn't happen. As has been pointed out previously, there has been a dramatic increase in youth use. It does not reduce opioid overdose deaths. Yes, it does not result in overdose any more than tobacco does. It just kills you in different ways, from driving accidents, crashes, to workplace injuries, to self-injuries, to suicide, to drug use, among other things. We heard complaints of the economic suffering endured by marijuana businesses in the county because of the last Board of Supervisors. Yet they still have millions to get into these businesses over again. Millions to buy office buildings, not just rent space, to hire lawyers, attorneys, architects, to put up billboards. When was the last time anybody saw a marijuana billboard by the county public health department focusing on the harms of marijuana use? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 7435. 7435.
See. Good afternoon. I'm Robin Joy Maxon, Chair of the Ramona Community Planning Group, and today I'm speaking to you as a resident of Ramona. From a land use perspective, here's one of many considerations. Cannabis cultivation is a water-intensive crop for a thirsty region. More than 500,000 people live in the unincorporated areas of San Diego County. With this high population, combined with a dry climate, San Diego County ranks second in California in terms of domestic well water, and that's according to the California Water Board. In our county, Ramona has the highest concentration of drinking water wells. This reliance on groundwater results in susceptibility to overdraft during droughts and when imported water supplies are limited. Residences, businesses, and farmers' water bills will increase when wells run slow or dry, as they will be forced to use very expensive municipal water sources. Currently, Ramona has the third highest water bills in the county. The recommendations for the county to conduct a CEQA review of this ordinance project and to specifically address the impacts of this cannabis project on the limited water source in our rural communities. Thank you for recognizing one of the many realities of rural living.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 1822. 1822. 1822. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. If we don't hear from you when your phone number is called, we'll come back to you. Our next speaker is 2965. 2965.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is KB Strange. I'm a pharmacist here in San Diego County for many years. As a member of the county's Tobacco Control Coalition, I'm concerned about the erosion of our smoke-free, vape-free workplace progress we've made here in San Diego and the state by the promotion of marijuana smoking lounges as part of this package involving marijuana businesses in the backcountry. Pharmacies like mine have been on the forefront of eliminating sales of smoking and vaping products because of decades of research regarding the direct connection of smoking and now vaping to disease, especially cardiac and respiratory disease, and its contribution to overall poor health. The county's Live Well program lists smoking and now vaping as one of its 3 most disastrous behaviors contributing to poor health and premature death. Do you no longer believe smoking and vaping's behaviors contribute to poor health outcomes? The health community is confused, and the county is also suggesting marijuana grows, which feel like we are becoming a Marlboro country. Everyone knows about the big tobacco lobby and the money it has thrown at influencing politicians for years. And now we know that big tobacco has made large financial investments in marijuana companies. So I wonder, is our county, which last year eschewed all things big tobacco and enacted tobacco retail licensure programs and flavored tobacco product bans, now in the back pocket of big marijuana? Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9887. 9887. 9887. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. And again, if we don't hear from you when your number is called, we will come back to you. So we will move on to 3800. 3800.
Thank you, Barbara Gordon. I am the advisor for a Hispanic youth group who are online school today. So I am here on their behalf as they want you to know they do not want to see marijuana businesses in their community. They recognize marijuana is a serious problem that leads to addiction. The youth group is focused on prevention, and they are working hard to change the perception among their peers that marijuana is harmless. The youth have seen how marijuana interferes with attention, motivation, learning, and memory. The students who vape, they know, regularly get lower grades and are more likely to drop out of high school. They realize by prohibiting these businesses, it will reduce availability and access of marijuana in their community, especially among their peers. They know 18-year-olds are able to buy vape cartridges from dispensaries and then resell to other students. The teens acknowledge the decisions made by the Board of Supervisors could either support their efforts to educate their peers on the risk of marijuana or side with the marijuana industry, who is all about big money and young people are their targets. Please take these into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6303. 6303. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. And again, if we don't hear from you when your number is called, we will come back to you. Our next speaker, here we go.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Espinoza, and I have worked in the prevention field for 10 years. Currently, I serve as a coordinator for the Coalition for Drug-Free Escondido. I am a resident, and I have children of my own. I would like to strongly urge the Board of Supervisors to extend the evaluation and reporting period in order to fully consider the accuracy of purported monetary and tax benefits, but more importantly for the public health implications, specifically those that negatively affect youth and minority and low SES communities. It is important that in addition to the marijuana industry, that the public health officials, law enforcement, medical officials, and prevention experts, parents, and youth also have a voice at the table and in the planning process. We do not have a great track record as to how we have approached other substances. If we look at the alcohol industry and ABC regulations, there are large issues of overconcentration, especially in low SES and minority communities, which increases underage drinking, drunk driving, and alcohol-related deaths. There are also enforcement issues and associated costs. We can see the same thing with tobacco, especially with the vaping epidemic. And now we have marijuana at the table. We already have so many issues that are disproportionately impacting minority communities. Access is not an issue for adults or youth. With increased marijuana legalization, it increases access. There's no cap on THC levels, there's no standard for drug driving, and there's no discussion of how secondhand smoke impacts multi-unit housing complexes. The most concerning of all is the mental health of our youth and the lack of affordable and accessible support and prevention resources. As I mentioned before, history does not have a great track record, and if fairness and equity is truly at the heart of this measure, then I urge you, for the sake of our youth and ensuring that all communities have the opportunity to thrive, that you please take a longer look at this issue and have a long-term plan for prevention in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9887. 9887.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Carol Green, and I live in the South Bay, San Diego area. Ms. Vargas, Supervisor Vargas, promised transparency in government when she was running for office. And I would like to speak to all of you and say that this is not the most transparent process. It feels very rushed, and it feels like people were consulted, but it feels like the people that were consulted were the people that stand to make a lot of money off the backs of our kids. You talked about outreach. I hope that you will do some outreach, but not just to industry leaders, people that are going to make money, but you'll talk to parents, you'll talk to community leaders, and you'll talk to people that deal with youth drug abuse and with mental health issues. I know that mental health has been important to the County of San Diego, but this is not in favor of mental health. We've heard about THC levels rising and about the correlation between psychosis and mental health. I wanted to say those things first because my child is not just a statistic in the psychosis induced by marijuana. He tried marijuana a few times and had a psychotic break. As a result of that, we went to a family counseling, the family to family through NAMI. 25 other families were there with us. Every single one of their loved ones experienced a psychotic break triggered by marijuana. That's my one little survey. It's anecdotal, but you all need to research this. I hope that when you're making these decisions, of course, you keep the county's best interest at heart, but go home and look at your own children and see if this is the result that you want for them. My child is gone. I can never get him back, but I can lend my voice to warn other parents of the horror that could be awaiting them. And I hope it never happens to any of you, but it could. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 7277. 7277. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Again, if we don't hear from you when your number is called, we'll come back to you. Our next speaker is 6598. 6598. If not, we will go to 6463. 6463.
Hello, good afternoon, Honorable Chair Fletcher and Board. My name is Dallin Young with Blue Water Government Affairs, and I'm here today on behalf of the 5 current operators whom you heard from earlier in the comments. We are neutral on the lifting of the 180-day timeline, but are simply asking the supervisors to uphold one of the clauses approved in the January 27th board letter, directing staff to, quote, report back to the board in 90 days with an update, including any regulatory changes that can be implemented within that time. The item before you today only addresses the process in which the new ordinance will be developed and does not address any changes that can be made to provide relief to the current operators. Whether the timeline is extended or not, this relief is incredibly needed as soon as possible. These legal businesses have been utterly neglected these past 4 years, with full intent from the previous Board of Supervisors to close them down, even though they have been operating in full compliance with both state and local law. Because of this neglect and unnecessary restrictions, they have been fighting to stay afloat. The concern is that if changes are not made, they will be forced to close their doors, leaving only illicit market shops to provide untested, unsafe, untaxed cannabis products to residents in the unincorporated area. Allowing this to happen is completely counterproductive as county code and law enforcement officers work to eliminate the illicit market. All we are asking is that the board and staff abide by the direction given on January 27th to provide regulatory changes that can be implemented while the new ordinance is completed. In the meantime, we look forward to working with county staff and stakeholders on both short-term relief for the current licensed operators and the long-term development of a comprehensive and equity-based ordinance. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6180. 6180.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Baxter, and I'm seated on the Fallbrook Planning Group, but I'm speaking to you today as a private citizen. The cannabis stakeholders speak to eliminating the discretionary use permitting process, which is required by ABC for any alcoholic beverage business to operate legally. Alcohol intoxication, though, is measured by field sobriety tests, yet there's no such technology for cannabis intoxication. So why, supervisors, would you propose to allow less stringent regulations for a substance which intoxication cannot even be measured yet? Until local law enforcement has accurate and reliable field sobriety testing that is readily available to respond to cannabis-related incidents, individual conditional use permits must be obtained to each applicant. Also, the cannabis stakeholders support outdoor grows and removal removal of regulation that requires businesses to operate in specific locations. Fallbrook, for example, has many agricultural zones that are either residential themselves or adjacent to residential properties. So without governance, our right to quiet enjoyment, light sensitivity, odor-free, and safe neighborhoods and towns is just tossed out the window. If there are no regulations for which law or code enforcement can actually enforce, why would anyone want to live or own a business in such an area, except for those in the cannabis industry themselves? Speaking of enforcement, what is the long-term plan for funding the additional staff and R&D? Will there be a cannabis department? And where does that money come from? Or will the taxpayer just be burdened with a ballot bond measure 5 to 10 years down the road? I sure hope not. The hope would be that the revenue would come from the industry itself and fund the increased enforcement, R&D, judges, clerks, admin, all that goes with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 6598. 6598.
Hello, from a hectic grandmother taking care of grandkids while their parents, a teacher and a nurse, are at work, and I appreciate this opportunity to share with you some firsthand experience I have with marijuana businesses. Just down the hill from me here in San Diego, we have 3 pot shops, and they are located very close to youth-sensitive areas. Granted, they are just 1,000 feet away, but trust me, you pass them coming and going whenever you go down to take your children to basketball tryouts and practices. I want to also tell you about the city of San Diego. It is true that they don't have CEQA, but they have a CUP process that requires all marijuana business applicants to appear before the planning group where they're going to be located and explain what's going on. And that planning group has the opportunity to express to the city their concerns. Sometimes the applicants return more than once, sometimes twice, so that there is a clear experience with what this marijuana business might bring to the area. And then the applicant goes to a hearing officer, and then it goes to the planning commission. I am sure that our county planning groups would want something at least as robust as this, although they are in favor of generally of a PEIR, but it's got to have something more elaborate to accommodate their very different areas. I also wanted to mention what happened in the city of San Diego, since I think Stephanie Baxter mentioned it, and that's the issue with establishing a bureau. Because of the amount of time that it takes for the city to deal with marijuana businesses, they established a bureau, and the funding is $1 million a year for their bureau. Is that going to happen to the county as well? And the city of Chula Vista, who is yet to really have businesses up and running, where they've been sued multiple times over the last 2 years, they had to hire another civil litigator to help them. And in the city of Vista, they had to hire a forensic bookkeeper to assist them in dealing with marijuana businesses.
Expired, but could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Judy Strang.
Thank you very much. Our next caller is 7234. 7234.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Ann Skelly. I regularly attend county planning group meetings where we grapple with keeping our community safe from outside disruptive forces and protecting our unique environment. The county has been a good place to raise my 3 adult sons. They and their friends have had their lives upended and have grappled with the changes that have come with the disruption of their educational and economic trajectories as a result of COVID. Their future plans have been hijacked. The planning group members have been sensitive to the needs of our families and our businesses, both of which have been sometimes very fragile. Our planning group members have been surprised that the Board of Supervisors, who do not live in the unincorporated areas, have made plans for our lands bringing marijuana businesses without a careful study and robust discussions with the citizens. If those studies and discussions had happened, we would have been told that what my sons need and our young people need are educational opportunities, technical skill instructions, and equipment to pursue their education and work and internship possibilities. Could we put the county's money there instead of pushing highly financed marijuana businesses into our county and enlarge their footprint at our expense? If the Board of Supervisors really cares about fairness and an equal playing ground for all, then give our youth a clear pathway to education and jobs, not pot businesses.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 1822. 1822. 1822, please press *6 if you'd like to address the board on this item. And then we also have a final call for 7277. So 1822 and 7277, you are our final two callers on this item. So if either of you would like to address the board on item 11, please press *6 now to unmute yourselves. 1822 and 7277. Chair Fletcher, we're not hearing from either of those two callers, so that appears to conclude testimony on this item.
All right, thank you, and thank you to all of the callers who called in. I think the easiest way here, maybe we'll go through our colleagues. I've got a couple comments, a couple questions. Maybe we'll kind of get through everyone. I'll kind of try and take some notes on folks' suggestions and see if we can encapsulate that into a revised motion. I know that there's going to be some changes. Just to start off, look, I agree. We've got to slow this down and make sure we get it right. I don't think it is viable that we can do this by June. I think the expectation that in just a few weeks we would have a completed ordinance with the stakeholder engagement that needs to happen and everything we need to do to get this right. And so I do and am supportive of us being a little more methodical here and making sure that we get this right. One of the questions I have for staff relates to the 5 existing facilities. I do think if the process is going to take longer, these are folks that are staring down a closure in April of 2021. So what steps can we take? Sorry, April of 2022, but there's no guarantee we'll have the final ordinance in place by then. And so I am interested in staff thoughts on that issue. I do think it's important that we provide them some certainty. Clearly, we're going in a different direction, and we need to provide them some certainty. And so I'm interested in their thoughts on some of the issues that we heard from those folks. It seems like under the medicinal permit, we could add edible and drinkable. That seems like we could probably regulatorily do that without amending an ordinance. But I'm curious for thoughts, questions on those. And then the second question I want to ask the staff is around the issue of a programmatic EIR. And is that, that's a very lengthy process. It's a very thorough process. And I'm curious, staff thoughts around a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration. How would that compare in timeline to do those options? And would it be possible to develop kind of parallel tracks where we can consider, which of those that we think would be best. And then the third on equity, I'm very glad our Office of Equity and Racial Justice is meeting, is working, is tackling this issue. I know I've heard from a lot of stakeholders who have been very engaged in this, and so I do appreciate that happening. And then the final point is I'm comfortable as we move forward to have something come back in 180 days, but I do think another 90-day check-in would be appropriate with an update, the opportunity from additional board input and direction. So those are my 2 questions were primarily around the existing facilities, staff thoughts on those, and then the CEQA aspect of a programmatic EIR versus a negative declaration or even a mitigated negative declaration in terms of the options that we may have moving forward. So let me have staff address those, and we'll go to a few of my colleagues.
Through the chair, Chair Fletcher, in terms of the request from the 5 existing dispensaries, we've been in contact with them in recent weeks and received the requests that they made today as well. In terms of the first item that they raised, the date to close by April of 2022, what we've indicated is we would prepare a zoning ordinance amendment to extend that date out to go beyond the end of whatever project that we would undertake, be it a programmatic EI or other, so that they would not be required to close prior to the board making a decision on future changes for the program. That does require a zoning ordinance amendment, which does require a presentation to the Planning Commission prior to moving forward and bringing it to the board. In terms of some of the other changes that they've requested, we've essentially said we want to work with them to see what can be done within a shorter time frame, and it would all depend on the level of CEQA that would be required to go with it and how it would relate to a larger project to avoid a piecemealing consideration as we start to implement portions of it. For example, some recommended or requested that they've requested today allowing to expand. If the expansion and new building permits were something along the lines of, a 25% expansion of existing retail or something, that seems viable. Some of the comments that I recall they had requested in 2016 when I worked with them in the past was wanting to start with a dispensary and then add a 10,000 square foot cultivation building. If the request is the latter, that would likely be not something that we could support to come back with the extension in the zoning ordinance to extend them past April of 2022, but we'd love to work with them to find a middle ground. In terms of the comment on adult use to shift from the medical, that also is outlined in the zoning ordinance. It would need to go in the zoning ordinance. If we were moving forward with a zoning ordinance amendment for the extending them beyond April of 22, as well as allowing some degree of building permits to modify or expand, we would be looking to do a CEQA exemption with that. Shifting to add adult use into that would likely be challenging to be able to do an exemption at that time and would extend our need to do a greater level of environmental analysis, but we will work with them to explore opportunities. In terms of the edibles request, that is not in the zoning ordinance, and we shared with them that that would be a regulatory code change that would need to come back to the board for consideration and still is subject to CEQA since it would be discretionary in nature. And we very much want to work with them and other stakeholders in considering any of these changes that we could bring back in a shorter period of time, much sooner than anything with the PEIR.
Okay, so thank you for that. So when we get to a motion, I'll just add a part to it. I want to hear from everyone, and I'll try and encapsulate it all in one. But basically, we'll be directing you all to do that, to work with the stakeholders and come back to us with regulatory zoning ordinance amendments that can best facilitate moving forward here, given the general direction we're headed. Now let's go to the second question about a programmatic EIR versus a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration in terms of the timing differences and the benefits of the different approaches.
Chair Fletcher. So the documentation and level of CEQA review is really determined by the scope and scale of the project conducted through an initial study. And based upon our research and outreach with other jurisdictions, the project as proposed would require a programmatic EIR. The benefits of that are that a lot of the issues associated with each individual application in the future would be assessed as part of the programmatic EIR. And so we would be looking at a typical establishment, identify the issues with that establishment, and potential mitigation measures. The closer that a project would align with that typical project, the more benefit they would have from tiering off the programmatic EIR. It's anticipated that larger, more complex requests may still require discretionary review and go through a process. An MND could be considered. However, it would probably be an eligible option if the scope of the project were reduced in terms of the number of uses allowed and the location in terms of land uses throughout the unincorporated area. Staff at this point has not been able to determine what scope and scale of a project could be addressed through an MND. Our approach at this point is to move forward with the project as directed by board and the programmatic EIR or the direction from board in terms of the exemption.
Okay, we'll come back. Let me go to my colleagues. I think Supervisor Anderson had his hand up first, and we'll go to Supervisor Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. So I've put a lot of time and effort in this. 4 of the 5 current open legal dispensaries are in my district. So this is directly impacting us. And, you know, I put a lot of time and thought into it. I wanted to make sure that there was local control and local input. Last Wednesday, I invited every planning group chairman to meet with me through Zoom. And I wanted to make sure that they were getting their input in. And then when I saw the county's list, I just saw Valadero, which is just one, but it didn't include Ramona. Or if the slide went back so quickly, maybe Ramona was there, but Ramona is the epicenter of 3, and then unincorporated El Cajon has the 4th. So looking at this, we made a commitment before my time as a board to allow these establishments to start, and they started operating under the belief that it was a legal business conducting legal work within the law. And then we later changed it and said, no, we're going to shut you down. And I wasn't here, so Chairman Fletcher, if you have more insight, correct me if I'm saying it wrong. I think that we have a moral obligation to restore them to where they were and to let them know that we're not going to abandon them, but that somehow they're grandfathered in. Having said that, I supported their initial board letter. And what I'm concerned about is if we don't have an EIR, will locals have enough time, will the Farm Bureau have enough time to give adequate input? And are we opening the door to large corporations because they have deep pockets and they can afford individual EIRs, and we're excluding the equity that we said that we wanted? So I want to be consistent with what we're doing, but I also understand the timetables are entirely different, and we can't get there with the way we're doing it.
Hey, Supervisor, real quick. I think there's general agreement we're not going to be able to pull this together by that original June 1st deadline. So I think there is an agreement we're going to do a much more robust review. The question is, do we do a programmatic EIR or do we do a mitigated negative declaration? But both of those are much more extensive processes than what was initially proposed. And so I think we're spot on. The need to engage, the need to hear stakeholders. I completely agree.
I apologize.
No, you're good. I just
trying to get the guy who knows the most through
we're going in the direction you are.
I'm speaking, not that I'm educating you all, but I have people that are going to call me 2 minutes after this meeting's over.
No, it's good.
I'm trying to avoid a lot of phone calls and save a lot of time. And you know, one of the things,
we need to slow it down. We need to slow it down a little bit and make sure we get some engagement.
But we also have to preserve the rights of those in the district, those 4 dispensaries that played by the rule and now are getting penalized. I also want to point out one other item that is really important, and you all may not be aware of this, but many of my planning groups that are supposed to be giving input on this are not allowed to meet because they can't meet in person, and they live in parts of the county that has no internet. So either they have satellite internet, which won't perform at a level that allows that to go, or there isn't public input. And I think that one of the solutions moving forward is allowing, if they have enough social distancing, allowing that they have representation by having meetings in their community with the social distancing, because the technology, these are areas that don't have the technology that allow them to meet. And I think that as a free people should have a right to representation. And we're talking about major changes in their lifestyle, so they should be at the table. So that, I have those 2 items, but what I would recommend and I'd like to see is to move forward with the EIR, but at the same time, preserve and restore what was promised to those dispensaries in advance And we know that state law has changed in the interim, so that would also have to include aligning our ordinance with state policy or state law. So that's the direction I'm heading. So I'm trying to split the baby so that nobody's left behind.
No, and I think we can encapsulate when we get one here from everyone else, but I think we'll be able to encapsulate your concerns about a long enough process for engagement, along with some protections for those current permit holders to make sure that they know they will be able to continue. And so I think we'll be able to do both of those. So thank you. Thank you, Supervisor. Let's go to Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. So first, I wanted to say thank you that I appreciate all the work done on this matter since the board approved our board letter back in January. And I do agree with county staff and stakeholders that we should be methodical in our process in order to ensure that the spirit of the board letter is preserved. However, I do want to highlight that I have some specific concerns on recommendation item number 4. The other ones I'm good with, but I'm going to just be very blunt with all of you, is that it's really interesting to me that now that we have added this equity lens to the process, the recommendation creates an extra barrier by requesting this programmatic EIR. And I understand where it's coming from, and I have, I do have concerns on whether a full environmental impact report is appropriate for every use of cannabis. Completing a full environmental impact report on all uses of cannabis will take about 24 months, as we have heard. And so I have, I went back with my team and looked at, other options in the city of San Diego. And I understand that some of this has been mentioned, but the city of San Diego was able to conduct discretionary reviews for their applicants, as were other jurisdictions. And then so I really want us to, as a county, to provide those options for all cannabis uses in the report back that we're going to get. I do support county staff working with regional partners in developing a comprehensive ordinance and permitting process to ensure that we are addressing environmental and social equity concerns. When county staff returns the mid-year review with recommendations regarding the zoning amendments and social equity program, could county staff also return with a process for discretionary review and conditional use permits or neighborhood use permits? And then also, can we ensure that the existing 5 cannabis businesses, and I know that Chair Fletcher, you asked for this, I really do think that they should be able to remain operational past the current 22 deadline. These businesses have been open for 5 years, and they should not be punished while we create a new process for new applicants. So I do understand the concerns from our social justice partners, but understand that I will always put our communities first. And we must really create an ordinance that represents our values. And so it's our duty to provide opportunities for our communities that for too long have been left out of the process and haven't had a fair opportunity to compete, which is the only reason why I agreed, one of the only reasons why I agreed to support this letter to begin with.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Vargas. Let's go to Supervisor Lawson-Remer, and then we'll try and bring this together.
Thank you. I mean, I have very little to add, except that I do support that we do need additional time to make sure that we really can consult adequately with stakeholders. I think that's important. And I would like to just reflect back. I think I heard a lot of good ideas coming from Chair Fletcher and from Supervisor Anderson. And, the idea that we would have an interim check-in in 90 days to have an opportunity for further input seems really important to me as well.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Let me just ask staff quickly to, Supervisor Desmond, I'm sorry, I see your hand there. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Here in a time of, COVID, behavioral health, homelessness, how marijuana came to the front of the door here to me is just amazing. But I'm not in support of allowing dispensaries or other cannabis facilities popping up throughout the unincorporated area. I'm not in favor of making it easier for permitting by using tax dollars for programmatic EIR. I would like to see, though, that the planning groups and potentially sponsor groups be part of the approval process in each of the communities. I know we're going to be able to develop an ordinance. Or I'm sorry, the board voted to go ahead and develop an ordinance. It should be done right, with ample public input and outreach. The only thing I really support is giving more time to the sponsor groups and to the public so they can weigh in and give input. I'm not sure yet, I haven't heard the motion yet to see if I'm going to support this item, but the only thing that I really support is giving them more time Everything else is pretty much ancillary, and I'm against it. So I'll wait to hear what the motion is before I give a yay or nay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. Okay, so here's what I think we'll do. If you have it handy, the 5 recommendations that are presently in the board letter, I'm going to outline a couple changes that I think can wrap up the concerns expressed by Supervisors Anderson, Vargas, and Lawson Reamer. So number 1, we would leave unchanged. Number 2, we would leave unchanged. On number 3, we would direct the staff to return to the board in 90 days with a progress report and return in 180 days with an update on stakeholder input, ordinance development, social equity program. So essentially, we're just going to have 2 check-ins. We're going to check in at 90 days, and we're going to check in at 180 days, where we can reassess how it's going. We can continue to have stakeholder engagement and do that. So essentially, what we'd be adding on number 3 is direct staff to return to the board in 90 days with a progress report, and return in 180 days, and the rest of it would stay unchanged. On number 4, and I want to get staff's thoughts, but let me share this, is direct staff to prepare an analysis of a programmatic EIR, a mitigated negative declaration or negative declaration, including pros and cons of each approach, along with timelines, and then allow additional stakeholder engagement, potentially reduce the cost of time associated with permitting, make the permitting process more equitable, and then adding at the end. So we're essentially adding at the top, we're adding mitigated negative declaration or negative declaration to the programmatic EIR. Let's look at all 3. And then to Supervisor Vargas's concern, we would say with the objective of narrowly defining the CEQA needs and expediting the permitting process, including ministerial permits, conditional use permits, or neighborhood use permits. So again, it's an evaluation of those, which would come back to us in 90 days. Number 5 would essentially remain unchanged. And then we would add number 6, directing county staff to work with stakeholders to modify the regulatory code to better facilitate sustainable operations by the existing permit holders. And we would ask for that to come back at the 90-day mark as well, in terms of the options of what we could do as a board. So I think those changes, that would take care to Supervisor Anderson and Vargas, and I think Lawson Reamer's point that the existing permit operators would have some certainty, and then we would assess out of the things they've requested, what's doable, what could we do to get that moving. I think we provide some options around the permitting, consistent with what Supervisor Vargas said. We can analyze a programmatic EIR versus a MND, and then we would come back in 90 days. So those are the main changes there. So I would put a motion on the floor to do that.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on that? And then I also want to ask the clerk if that was clear. I'm not sure if that was clear.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. Yes, that was clear. If I could just have some clarification on the revisions to recommendation 4, the last phrase that you had about narrowly defining.
Go ahead.
Narrowly defining the CEQA needs and expediting the process, and then the remaining portion of that phrase.
Yes, with the objective of narrowly defining the CEQA needs, expediting the permitting process, including exploring ministerial permits, conditional use permits, or neighborhood use permits, period.
Thank you.
Let me ask quickly, staff, if anything in those changes seems insurmountable or a great challenge.
Chair Fletcher.
Insurmountable. If it's a challenge, we're okay with challenges. Just if it seems insurmountable.
We look forward to coming back in 90 days, in particular as it relates to the programmatic EIR, MND, and anything less than that, to be able to provide you with the scope of the type of work that could go into each. And then we will also look at the benchmarking for purposes of other jurisdictions, since that was something that had come up as well.
Good. Okay. All right, we have a motion by myself, a second by Vice Chair Vargas. Any final thoughts? Wes Clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond.
No.
Vice Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Chair Fletcher.
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes with Supervisor Desmond voting no, all other supervisors being present and voting aye.
That concludes the business before the board today. There is one adjournment in memory I would like to present in honor of Dr. Dorothy Zinkel. Dr. Dorothy Zinkel was born in 1960 in Kansas after receiving her bachelor's and master's degree in nursing from the University of Phoenix. She earned her Doctor of Philosophy in Nursing Science from the University of San Diego in 2002. Dorothy dedicated her talents to the City Heights community that she loved so deeply as a founding partner of the City Heights Partnership for Children. In 2005, she became the executive director of the Community Schools for City Heights Educational Collaborative through the SDSU Research Foundation. Her commitment to school health was second to none. Her work directly impacted students of all ages in City Heights. She collaborated with many community organizations and clinics, Mid-City Clinic, La Maestra, to provide a model of school-based health clinics. Dr. Zirkle had various leadership roles and was an instructor at the SDSU School of Nursing. She will be remembered for her commitment to her students and her love of nursing and healthcare. Even while she was busy working at the SDSU School of Nursing, she was always out in the community, listening and engaging with the families and the children throughout. In addition to the incredible impact she made in the community at large, she had a profound impact on countless people who all benefited from her love, dedication, and generosity. Dorothy loved her dog, a little Yorkie named Tallulah. She loved traveling the world, and she loved Thai food. She was an excellent baker. She enjoyed art and filling her home with different art pieces. She is survived by her two daughters, Megan and Jennifer, and she will be missed. And it's my honor to adjourn today's meeting in memory of Dr. Dorothy Zinkel. Thank you. With that, this meeting stands adjourned.
Next regular meeting of the board will take place on Tuesday, March 16th, 2021.